Before the crappy movie The Forest came out, and before Logan Paul discovered a dead body in the suicide forest of Japan, I made a Trials Fusion track by the name of Aokigahara, which is the infamous suicide forest located at the base of Mount Fuji in Japan. This is a place where lots of paranormal things happen, and being a fan of paranormal things myself, I decided to go ahead and make a track based on this location because I honestly hadn't seen it been done before, so I wanted to make it happen. In this video, I'm going to talk about kind of my thought process behind the track and what makes the track look and sound the way it does. I also want to talk about some personal things that occurred during and after the time that this track was created. Some really unusual things went on in real life during the creation and after the creation of this track, so stay tuned for that. The real life location of this forest is fraught with tragedy. People go there and discover dead bodies there all the time, with hanging from trees or any other nefarious ways of death. So it's definitely filled with a lot of sadness, a lot of sorrow, a lot of misfortune. So I wanted to convey that through sound on this game. So the sound it's pretty creepy. I tried to make it as creepy and as kind of all-encompassing as possible. So I used 4 different sounds simultaneously. I looped them and changed the pitches of them to make various alterations, various versions of that specific sound. So the final result is a pretty creepy sound. So go ahead and have a listen. Also, the lights on this track are completely zero. So all the ambient lights, the sunlight, moonlight, headlights for the bike, everything is completely set to 0. So there are no lights whatsoever. The only source of light in the entire track is a point light, which radiates in all 360 degrees. It's just a point light. It's glued to the bike. So the light goes where you go. So I think that added a pretty cool, interesting visual dynamic to it that I haven't seen in any other Trials track, to be honest. And of course, I made it to where it wasn't just a regular white light, it had kind of an orange or amber tint to it, so I kind of added to it. So the driveline itself is pretty straightforward, it's pretty basic, it's not terribly complicated or difficult, but it does require just a few runs through it just to make sure you get everything correct and hit all the time savers correctly. The track also ended up being picked by Red Links for one of their featured tracks for that week. So I'm pretty happy with the final result. It's not a super complicated track. It doesn't have a lot of complex position events or lots of logic or lots of other crazy stuff that other track builders are really good at. I'm okay with it, but I'm mainly a decoration / sound kind of guy, but it came out good. It came out looking and sounding the way that I had hoped to achieve. So that's that. And now this is where it gets a little bit strange, because the house where we were living at the time that I was making this track, I personally now believe it to be haunted. My wife kind of felt the same way, and I'm really skeptical about paranormal and stuff like that. I mean, I do believe in it, but I also think that most things that people consider to be paranormal can be explained by basic rational things. I don't know if I tapped into some sort of negative energy while making this track, or if there was something already there in the house. We no longer live in that house, by the way, but one of the few things that happened there, well, there's a few things that happened there, and these all seem to have started, although there were some smaller things that happened before I made this track, but afterwards what seemed to have happened was there was just some crazy things that occurred. One of the things was I had left the house with the kids. It was just me and the kids. We just left to get some groceries, and then about 15 minutes after I leave or so, my wife calls me on the phone, and she's clearly got terror in her voice, and she basically says, please come home and get me right now. And I'm like, well, what happened? What's going on? And apparently she heard a disembodied voice in the hallway, which there's only one, main hallway in the house, but she was the only one in the house, and she heard an actual voice in the hallway. It sounded like a female voice humming something for about a second and a half, but still, it's enough to totally creep her out, because you can tell whenever there's a sound coming from outside or something is like resonating from within the house, and that's what it was. So she was terrified, and nothing really came after that directly, but sometime afterwards, another thing that happened was we had a living room and then the kitchen with a counter in between the two, and my wife looked over the kitchen counter onto the floor of the kitchen, and she saw a little person. At first she thought it was our son, our 2-year-old at the time, 2-year-old son, and because it had the same size, shape, it just looked like him from peripheral vision. And whenever she looked at his face, it had his face, but it was distorted. She said it just looked effed up, in her words. It was distorted. And then he ducked under and went under the cabinet, and never saw him again. It was just a super terrifying moment for her, and I think it kind of left a emotional / mental scar. And I don't blame her. That would pretty much mess me up as well. But the third thing that I wanted to mention that happened was probably the craziest thing I've ever seen. And this one happened to me, so I can vouch for it. I can say this is totally 100% true. I also believe my wife. I'm not going to say that she's ever, lying about this stuff. She has no reason to. But I've seen some pretty crazy stuff in my time, and this is probably one of the weirdest ones. Completely just bizarre. In a previous house, I told you I'm super skeptical. My wife is saying, I think there's something here. I think there's something, in this house. And I'm like, no, man, this house ain't haunted. And then seconds after I said that, I saw a chair slide 5 feet out from the desk by itself with no interaction whatsoever. I'm like, I just brushed it off. I'm super, super skeptical. I'm constantly looking for a logical explanation for everything. So even with that, I had an experience that I will never forget, and it just didn't make any sense. So what happened was, I had laid down with my 4-year-old son, who if at nighttime, if we don't lay down with him, or one of us doesn't lay with him, he'll just get out of bed and just have a party all night. So I usually, what I would have done at the time is, I would lay down with him, wait till he falls asleep, and then I kind of sneak out of the room. With this particular night, I didn't sneak out because I fell asleep, and then I woke up in the morning. It was morning whenever I finally woke up, and I woke up because my wife had she opened the door, and she kind of peered in through the doorway. I only saw the top half of her, and she's shaking my leg to wake me up, and I'm waking up out of my slumber, and she didn't say anything to me. She just kind of had a blank expression, and just kind of slowly exited the door frame. I'm like, all right, well, I guess I'm gonna be getting up now. She wants me for something. So I got out of bed, closed the door, went out in the living room, and there's no one there. I'm by myself. I'm like, okay, well, I guess she went back into her room with the baby. We had 3 kids at the time, and so it was pretty strange. I was just by myself, and I guess she'll be out any second now. So naturally, with no one else being awake at the time, I jump on the Xbox, start playing. So in 30 minutes after that, she comes out of the room, and she kind of has a kind of an upset look, how long have you been up? How long have you been up? And I'm like, what are you talking about? I was kind of angry. I'm like, you woke me up. You went in there and woke me up. And she's like, no, I didn't. So I was like, well, that's weird, because I saw you wake me up. So that's my story. It's totally strange. She apparently did not wake me up, did not come in the room at all, and I saw something that looked like her, and it was super disturbing after the fact, once you've learned that what you see isn't actually what you really saw. So I'm totally not crazy, and like I said, I'm always looking for a logical explanation, but this one I can't. I got nothing. But that's it. I just wanted to throw this video out there. I mean, lots of kind of things go on behind the scenes of some of these tracks, and this is a pretty straightforward track on the surface, but I did want to let you guys know kind of what happened behind the scenes whilst I created it and afterwards. But I hope you enjoyed this video. Have a great day. Hopefully you liked this video. Please hit like and subscribe on the video. It really helps out. Speaking of help, I do have a GoFundMe page available, and I'm using this in place of a Patreon. So if you enjoy these videos, if you enjoy my trials tracks, please consider donating. It is primarily for my autistic son, and it really helps him with his speech therapy, occupational therapy, ABA, and the private schooling. We're trying to get him as much help as he can get, so any help you can offer in that regard would be greatly appreciated. Once again, thanks for watching and have a fantastic day.